Hello and welcome to the Jackcast, the Swansea City podcast. I am Guto and Steve, and with me, as always, we have Steve and Carol. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very good, very good. Better than Matt, who is unfortunately missing this podcast due to illness. He also missed the eventful away game at Huddersfield over the weekend because of said illness. So we hope Matt's going to make a quick recovery and he'll be back with us soon enough. We're just going to dive straight in because we have a mountain of topics to run through, including matches against Southampton and Huddersfield, all sorts of transfer goings on, the news that we are finally allowed back in stadiums, and we've got 2 games to preview. So with that in mind, Steve, let's go all the way back to the Southampton game, FA Cup 3rd round, the Swans' first game in about a month. My opinion, I thought it looked like we had not played in a month for long periods, that game, particularly the start of it, where for the first 30 minutes, I thought we were holding on and pretty lucky to just be the 1 goal down. But then a big turning point in the game with the red card. First of all, do you think it was a red card for Jan Valery?
It's a good question, really. I mean, I think it probably was because it was a foolish move, really, wasn't it? And wasn't he already on a yellow card? And you're thinking, yeah, well, when you do that, then you are asking for trouble. But I mean, Southampton should be kicking themselves based on that, really, because I think if they hadn't been for that red card, I think they probably would have won quite comfortably and wouldn't need an extra time, really, because we did look quite shapeless up to that point, I would say. So it was a big moment in the game, wasn't it? And I think they, really Southampton shot themselves in the foot, didn't they?
Absolutely. I thought Southampton were fantastic for the first 30 minutes, and they'd obviously picked quite a strong team. They were looking to get through to the 4th round, so fair play to them for taking it seriously. I was surprised by our team selection, that we didn't go a little bit stronger. There were quite a few unusual picks there, players who haven't played much and players played in unusual positions. A bit strange considering we hadn't played for a month and we probably needed, a lot of those players would have needed the match practice. But how do you think, Steve, we did after getting that man advantage? Because the game definitely settled down, but it took a long time for us to finally get that goal.
I mean, it did. We had more possession, didn't we? I mean, I agree with you in terms of it was a strange team selection, but I mean, we don't know who had COVID and was recovering and everything like that, really, do we? So I think it was always going to be a bit of a strange one, although, I must admit I wasn't really expecting to see Cullen, Obafemi and Pirro in the same team, and it didn't really work, did it, if we're being honest. But we did do better after that. We had more of the ball, but I mean, if we're honest, we didn't really ask a great deal of questions, did we, to Southampton, which, has been probably a theme maybe more earlier in the season. I think in the games, certainly through November, December, we were creating chances, and I think it was a case of us sometimes not taking them. But I felt like we didn't really offer a lot, and we were waiting really for, I suppose, a chance for Pirro, and eventually one came, didn't it? And he did stick it away, and obviously that was it, to take it into extra time. But we were definitely better, I think, after that red card. But before that, it was men against boys, really, wasn't it?
It really was. It really was. And I couldn't agree more about the Obafemi and Cullen experiment. It just didn't work for them at wide. They were pretty ineffective, it has to be said. And I think, both of those players, they're central strikers. They play best leading the line. And if you're not going to play them in those positions, I don't think you can play them anywhere, if I'm being honest. The problem for those two is that Pirro's been so good this season and he's kept them out. But unless, Pirro's injured, it's difficult to see them getting starts, really. That's the thing, because they clearly, aren't gonna be very effective out wide if that's what we're asking them to do. The game went to extra time. Do you think Russell Martin would have wanted the extra 30 minutes?
No, I don't think he would. I mean, if you're looking at the first game for a month, there'd have been a lot of players flagging by the end of that end of extra time. Really, I mean, playing 2 hours would have been hard goal, wouldn't it? Especially against a good side. So that was not ideal. I think everybody would agree with that. Southampton probably didn't want that either. But if you can't be separated after 90 minutes, that's what happens, isn't it? I suppose that's better than, this week playing a replay and having to travel down to the South Coast. But, I think it would have been better if there'd been a resolution either way, really, in the 90 minutes, wouldn't it?
Exactly. I mean, nobody wanted a replay from that game. I had quite a few Twitter debates after that match about the merits of replays, and I'm sorry, they're outdated. They're totally outdated. A couple of people said, "Oh, but what about the little clubs who dream of a trip to Old Trafford, etc." Those situations are few and far between. It's very rarely a sort of did Burton get a replay at Old Trafford once? I can't remember, but
Exeter drew at Old Trafford as well, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, every once in a blue moon, you'll get a team that wins a replay at Old Trafford or the Etihad or the Emirates or Anfield or somewhere like that. But they are really a tiny.
Like I said to you before, I think if two teams agree beforehand they don't want a replay, then they shouldn't have to have one. But I also think that, say now Swindon played Man City, Swindon would have the right to say, no, if we'd like a replay if it gets to that point.
Yeah.
I know maybe you could argue then it's different rules slightly, but that again, that's the luck of the draw, isn't it? I do think you should be able to not have a replay if you don't want one, but you shouldn't be denying the other clubs either. Like the argument against Man City then would be with Swindon, well, pick a strong enough team to make sure it doesn't go to a replay.
Yeah, I wouldn't be against that. One of the things I don't like about replays, though, is that they do incentivize teams to play for the draw. And it's, football is about glory, and the FA Cup is about glory, and you don't remember the teams that get draws. You remember the teams that get the wins. We'll remember Cambridge beating Newcastle for years to come because, it was an amazing, amazing achievement. But I just wonder if they'll, not maybe that much, but in a lot of games you see teams just play for the replay, and that it's as if a replay is better than a win for them. And it's that goes against the spirit of football, and it probably goes against the spirit of the FA Cup. Do we really want that? I don't know. It's a debate for another time. We don't really have time on this podcast to debate that. Just to finish off on Southampton, we took the lead through an own goal. And I was absolutely landed, thinking we were going through to the fourth round. I was celebrating, jumping around my brother's living room, and then it lasted less than a minute, Steve. Put simply, we've seen this before this season, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. We've picked up a bad habit now. We have to say, don't we, of conceding from our own goals, really. So. We've got to be more switched on, I think, haven't we? That's how we'd have to describe it. I mean, it's not really good enough, is it? You've got to be, the old saying, isn't it? You're never so vulnerable as when you score.
But that's rubbish. That thing is absolute rubbish. Teams do not tend to concede straight after scoring. It's very rare that happens. So why? But for some reason with us this season, we've been doing it. I can never remember the Swans being like this and being a soft touch straight after taking the lead. You should be at your absolute strongest. You should be right. We're in control now. But for some reason we switch off at kickoff, and I don't really understand how it is that we're at our weakest straight after scoring. It's just pretty unprofessional, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the fact that occasionally you will concede after scoring when you. I mean, that's just one of those things. But we're looking at, there's several incidents now, isn't there? Obviously, there's the two in that Reading game, wasn't there? And now we're looking at that one as well with Southampton. I mean, you've just got to learn lessons, haven't you? I mean, if we keep doing it, you're going to cause yourself problems all the time. So I think that's what's really frustrating about it, isn't it? You see, when you've got a perceived weakness, you've got to try and work on it and make sure that you're not exposing it all the time, because other teams now may well play us, and if they concede to us, they might think, like, this lot regularly concede after scoring. Get into them early on after it and try and get a goal back straight away. So I think that's what's frustrating, really, isn't it? I mean, you should be more switched on after you've scored, and it does seem to be a weakness for us, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's not the only time it's happened this season as well. It happened away at Preston as well, when we took the lead, and then they scored, pretty well. I think 2 minutes afterwards, And then, yeah, it's happened once. It's happened a couple of times this season, and it's just very strange, really. You could say it happened. Maybe it's a bit more of a stretch of the Birmingham game. There was a bit more of a gap between Obafemi scoring and them scoring their winner. But yeah, it's a bad habit. It's an unusual habit, and it's not one that we really want to that we want to last, really. So yeah, unfortunately, the Swans couldn't hold on for the win against Huddersfield. Which was a bit of a disappointment, but not against Southampton, I should have said. Not entirely surprising, considering we had been away for a month and hadn't played any kind of competitive football in that time. One of the positives, Steve, from that Southampton game, I thought, was the performance of Flynn Downs, who was given the captain's armband and did very well against an experienced Southampton midfield. And, well, you went up to Huddersfield over the weekend. He had another brilliant match up in Yorkshire.
Yeah, he did. I mean, he's been one of the finds, really, isn't he, of the season. I remember when we signed him, thinking to myself, "Oh, okay, that's an interesting one." And if I'm honest, I thought he was going to be a replacement for Matt Grimes, really, because it was a fair outlay that we've spent on him in our terms these days, because we don't have a great deal of money, do we? But he's been a great find, and I mean, it just shows you that there are players in the lower divisions, and obviously, this is why you need to back your manager in the transfer market, which we'll come on to later. But yeah, Downs, not known for his goal scoring, but obviously popped up with a goal as well, which was great on the weekend. But he was definitely one of our standout performances on Saturday up at Huddersfield, and he's been like that for most of the season, hasn't he?
I absolutely love him. I think he's an absolute fantastic player. He's only 22, but plays like a seasoned pro. Like you, I didn't know much about him before we signed him, and he's been a revelation. I mean, he does a bit of everything, really. He is so good defensively, and what I love about him as well is when he goes into a tackle, he's not just looking to kind of clear it and that's it. He goes into a tackle looking to emerge from that tackle with possession, and he's got the confidence to kind of try and play his way out of tight spots. He's also got the physique for it. He's got that strength and the good feet to do that. He's got the best pass completion ratio in the entire championship, so he's very comfortable on the ball, very rarely misplaces a pass. He's just a very, very talented young player. I said before, I think he reminds me a lot of Declan Rice in the way that he plays. He's just got that same kind of composure. He plays the game the same way. I'm not saying he's as good as Declan Rice, but the style is very, very similar. And I just love watching him play every single time. I think he's an absolute star and one of our best players this season. But that goal came, Steve, after we had fallen behind in the first half. I couldn't watch the match, but you were there. What was that first half like?
Not great, if I'm honest with you. We looked a bit shaky defensively, which isn't, which has been the norm really recently, isn't it? And I was a bit surprised that Hamer started, number one. And if I'm honest, early on he picked the knock up, and I was thinking, well, he's really struggling here. And I was surprised he wasn't taken off. He did seem to, maybe he was able to run the injury off eventually. But, I did feel a bit sorry for him in some ways, because if you pick it up a knock, what can you do? I mean, obviously he made a decent save for the goal before. Obviously it was a parry, wasn't it? And then it was tapped in. But, I didn't think we were great in the first half. It just felt like we were, a little bit rusty. We weren't really offering a lot going forward. And it was sort of what I expected, to be honest. I didn't go into that game feeling particularly confident, and at half time it had gone as I'd expected, but it did get better after that, which was really encouraging.
Yeah, because in fairness, Huddersfield went into that game in some good form, and they are just outside the playoff spots in the Championship. They've had a surprisingly good season, but by all accounts, I mean, second half it was just ultra dominance basically by the Swans. I've seen a lot of people say that actually we should have been coming home with 3 points really.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the only criticism I would give the Swans really would be that we did really pin them in their half, and it was one-way traffic. but we didn't ask them enough serious questions. I don't think there's a lot of shots from outside the box. Their keeper didn't have a great deal of good saves to make. I think that was the problem. There was a chance with Obafemi where he did make the keeper make a save, but he had a better angle to go with it just before he'd taken an extra touch, and you're thinking, well, if he'd done that, maybe that would have resulted in a goal. I think pretty much the goal did come a minute or two after that anyway, but I think there was just occasions where maybe we didn't pick the right options and this type of thing, really. So I think that was the only criticism I would throw at us, but we did play a lot better. And the most encouraging thing from my point of view was actually that we did get stronger as the game went on, and you would think a team that hadn't played for a while would, would probably maybe start to fade in the second half, but I didn't think that was the case. And the other encouraging thing is, I mean, as you said, Huddersfield have had a good season. They've been on good form recently, but we did make them look quite ordinary. So, you've got to say that we did really well. And I think Sorba Thomas, obviously the Welsh international, did come out and say that we're the best team that they've played. So, I mean, that probably says a lot, doesn't it?
Does he fancy a move? Because we could really do with a wing back / winger right now.
Yeah, I'd be up for that.
There you go. So, I mean, one point coming back from with a point from a tough, away game at somewhere like Huddersfield. It's not to be sniffed at. I know people will say, we could have won it, but I think we'd have all, taken that before kickoff. Just very quickly before we move on from Huddersfield, Steve, it was the first time that Swansea fans have been able to watch their team play since the 11th of December. I think there was quite a lot of pent-up emotion and pent-up excitement. We've all seen the video of the goal celebrations and one fan getting a bit overexcited and jumping over the barrier and crashing into the advertising hoardings. Good atmosphere on the weekend?
Yeah, it was a good atmosphere, especially in the second half when we were pushing. I think, as you say, really, we took quite a lot of fans up there. I think a lot of people thinking that, we might be locked out for a little while at home games. So, yeah, a lot more people probably went than normal. I'd say with 1,100, you're probably expecting more likely to be 500, I would say, up there. So we took twice as many as normal, really. And, yeah, I think everybody was up for it. I mean, you are, aren't you? It's a bit like on the opening day, isn't it, where you haven't played for a while and everybody's looking forward to it. So it's sort of had a similar feel to it because we've had what essentially is a winter break, haven't we? So not playing for ages. So, yeah, you could just sense that it was a good atmosphere in it and everyone was, maybe a bit more up for it than normal, which is, that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But one player who was absent and we've learned a bit more now about why he was absent is Jamie Patterson. He's definitely been making the headlines over the last few days. One of Swansea's best players over this season. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. He's really endeared himself to fans. Played a key role in the South Wales derby win against Cardiff. A firm fan's favourite until possibly this week, Steve, because, clearly there is now a chance that he could be leaving after what seems to be a disagreement over the state of his contract with the club. And it's now seen him, it seems, refuse to play for the team and not, according to the headlines, not turn up for training today either. So, this isn't a good situation, is it?
No, it's not. How can we describe this now? I would say Patterson, as you say, has been one of our best players this season. He probably came in here on a contract that was not as good as what he probably would have got in normal times. It's just that COVID has changed the market. So, you're not usually going to get an experienced championship player on a 1 year plus a 1 year option deal, probably for less money than what he would usually get as well. So, from the club's point of view, it was a good deal. And obviously the player was sort of in a position where he was left in limbo. The season was about to start. He didn't have a club. And you're thinking, well, this is a decent enough offer. I'm probably not going to get a better one. So I'll sign it, even though he probably thinks he's worth a bit more, which, is sort of fair. But then obviously he's come in. He's done a lot better than probably everybody expected, maybe even himself. And, I think that the option on the contract was always going to get triggered. I mean, that wasn't up for debate, was it? I think, from my point of view, what the Swans probably should have done is triggered it sooner. and said to him, look, we're going to trigger this just to give us some leeway, but we would like to offer you a little bit of a better contract because you've made a good contribution. And I think that would be fair, really, because, you know, he has done really well for us, arguably being our best player this season. I think definitely in the running for it. And, you know, I think a lot of it centres now, doesn't it, on whether was he promised a better deal or not. If he was, then he's entitled to feel aggrieved. If he wasn't, then, you know, this really doesn't look good either way. But one thing you can't do from my point of view, you can't go on strike. You know, if anybody else did that, if me or you did it, I think we'd be handed RP45 pretty quickly. And I mean, it's disrespectful to the supporters. It's disrespectful to his teammates and his manager, really. So, you know, I think Patterson needs to come out and say something. That's the main thing. I mean, you know, this story's been in the press now for a couple of days. No one from the club or him has commented on it. Now Patterson needs to justify himself to the supporters, really, why he's not been playing. And I think, you know, if he's not going to do that, then, you know, I'm struggling to see a way back for him, I've got to be honest, because it's going to be difficult for the Swans now to offer him a new contract with the way that he's behaved, because then it sets a bit of a precedent, doesn't it? I mean, our other players going to think, right, well, this guy kicked off as unprofessional and has got himself a new contract. So why don't I do the same? And then you're on a bit of a slippery slope, aren't you? So we're in a tricky position now, and it all feels unnecessary, and it's a shame, isn't it? Because Patterson has done really well for us. He's a key player. I think if he'd played the weekend, we might have won, because sometimes that final ball, for example, was lacking, and he may have been the player that could have helped us get a winning goal. So yeah, it all feels very unnecessary and a real shame, doesn't it? I'm sure you echo a lot of those thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we don't know the ins and outs of what's gone on in the boardroom, you know, over these contract discussions. It is very weird that a contract extension is agreed and announced, and then suddenly the player says, actually, I'm not happy with it. That's highly unusual. You just don't see that happening. So what's happened for that to take place? You know, has the club been a little bit shady in the way it's dealt with it? Has he just not read the fine print and has realised afterwards, you know, oh, nuts, I've done something a bit stupid here. I probably shouldn't have signed this without reading the fine print. Who knows? Have other clubs maybe got involved and maybe turned his head a little? We just don't know. But what I don't like is the fact that he's gone on strike, really, and refused to play. It's not a good look for any footballer, as far as I'm concerned. And it's one thing doing it in the summer when there is a possibility of a really big transfer, for example, with kind of Gylfi Sigurdsson when he was, you know, clearly on the way to Everton, but the clubs were just not agreeing on a price. I can kind of understand that, because it's not in anybody's interest for Gylfi Sigurdsson to play in a pre-season friendly, say, and get injured. And then scupper a deal which would have made the Swans a lot of money. And both, you know, let's face it, the Swans wanted that deal to happen as well, not just Everton. So I can understand in that kind of situation why, as unpleasant as it is, you know, these things happen. But this kind of thing is more difficult to stomach. This is more kind of similar to the kind of Lyle Taylor situation at Charlton a season or two ago. It's really unpleasant. It's not nice to see a player kind of down tools like that and throw his toys out the pram, really. You always want your players to be a bit more professional than that. And like you said, Steve, it's a luxury the footballers have that no other profession really has. I mean, nobody who is a teacher or, you know, a cleaner or a doctor or, you know, or any other field of normal work, you know, if either of us was just to say, you know, I'm not happy with the state of my contract and how much I'm getting paid, so I'm just not going to work. I'm not going to turn up for work today. I mean, let's face it, we'd be surprised if we kept our jobs, wouldn't we? It's a luxury the footballs have that they are able to do that, but it's pretty disrespectful to the fans as well. It's just not nice. It's a really unprofessional way of doing it. I don't know how much kind of the agents are getting involved and maybe persuading him. That happens a lot, obviously, but it's just a really unpleasant situation. My hopes are that it can be rectified, and that both parties will come to their senses and work out kind of, Patterson, you've been a bit of an idiot here not playing, and the club then realise Patterson is an important player. We don't have anybody else in his position who can do what he does. It's in everybody's best interest for this to be rectified. It's just unclear how it's going to be rectified, really. Will it end with Patterson forcing a move? Will it end with both parties coming back around the negotiating table and maybe putting a couple of extra numbers on that contract? We'll just have to wait and see. But I mean, Steve, do you see any kind of way around this? I mean, we've seen players do U-turns in the past. Ferry Bodder was a famous one, of course, where he looked destined to leave and then suddenly signed a contract extension. But it has to be said, it doesn't happen that often, does it? Usually with the Swans, when a player is rumoured to be going away, that tends to be the way it goes.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to say that he's more likely to not be here on February the 1st than be here. That's how I'm reading it at the moment. But, I mean, let's look at it another way. We don't know if there's any interest in him for a start. Nobody's massively been linked with a move.
I'd be amazed if there isn't any interest after the stories that have been recently.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
And he wouldn't cost too much for any club that was looking to buy him, because he's 30 years old.
He could go for $1 million, wouldn't he?
Yeah, possibly $1 million, but he's 30 years old. He's got no Premier League experience. He's in quite possibly the best form of his career this season. If not, he's right up there with the best that he's played. But he is a player who's had a patchy career on the whole. So it wouldn't cost too much for a promotion chasing club to come in and nick him away, you would have thought.
No, I think that's true as well, but you just don't know, do you? I mean, is there going to be, is someone going to make an offer? I mean, what the problem with the Swans is, we know what we're like. We've got this horrible history now of on deadline day, accepting deals that we think are not very good. And let's be honest, people in football talk, they know the score. They will know that the Swans have got this reputation, and they will probably test the water on deadline day with a crap offer. And if the player digs his heels in, we got a problem then, haven't we? So, he's probably going to go somewhere, isn't he? That's the general outlook. I mean, if he doesn't, he's probably going to have to be reintegrated, you would have thought. Although the manager could afford to say, you're staying in the stands. I mean, he does seem like someone you wouldn't mess with, really, Russell Martin. I mean, a few players have been dropped at various points of the season. So, I don't think it would be a case of the window would shut and we would bend over backwards to put him back in, like we would have done with, like say Sigurdsson you mentioned earlier. We probably would have, wouldn't we? But I think the chances are he's not going to be here, is he?
It's such a shame, because he's been so good for us this season, and his partnership with Pirou is fantastic, and he had been doing all the right things. I mean, he seemed to be loving life here, so I don't know what's changed, but clearly something's gone on behind the scenes that's affected his relationship with the club hierarchy. But it's ended up in this mess, and it's just not what we needed at all. I mean, when we were looking at the start of January at the situation with the squad, I think we were thinking more kind of additions than losing big players. And we've already lost Ethan Laird. Jamie Patterson could very well leave at this point. It's not ideal, it has to be said. I just really hope it gets rectified, because as I've seen people say, oh, let him go, nobody's bigger than the club. But using common sense here, if we can keep Jamie Patterson and persuade him to play, then that's clearly in the club's best interest, because he's been phenomenal for us. He may have to work hard to regain favour among the fans, but we need a player like Jamie Patterson. So hopefully common sense will prevail on both sides, and they'll realise, come to some kind of agreement that resolves this. But that is hopeful talk, rather than kind of what I think will happen. We could be surprised, but it's up in the air, and it's left the club in a difficult position. But it's also left Jamie Patterson in a difficult position, Steve, because at the end of the day, he is under contract to the club. The club, he only goes if the club accept an offer from elsewhere. So what happens if, there isn't a good enough deal and he's stuck here at the end of January? I mean, he's faced with a choice then. He can either sulk and not play at all and waste some of the best years of his career, or he can, get down to work and work his way back into the team. They could go all sorts of ways, but there's a lot of uncertainty now, and well, it's yet to be seen really how this gets worked out. But it's really, really not a pleasant situation. Another player who is leaving is Jake Bidwell, who has joined Coventry on a free transfer this week. And I'll be honest, Steve, I've been surprised by the positivity shown towards Jake Bidwell this week, because I actually expected people to be like, oh, good, who cares, etc. I didn't realise people held Jake Bidwell in such high regard, because from my memory, most of his time here at the club has been kind of people, or at least a lot of the time he's been at the club, has been people kind of complaining about the deficiencies in the game and what he can't do rather than what he can do. So I was a bit surprised to see that there was a really positive reaction online when it was announced towards Jake Bidwell, then when it was announced that he was leaving, and a lot of people very disappointed. How did you feel about it when he left?
First of all, can I make the point that I get the feeling that some people are disappointed purely because he scored against Cardiff. Like, I do think that does count for a lot.
Do you actually think our fans are that fickle that they would change their mind entirely about a player based on one goal against Cardiff?
Well, do you think that when Marvin Emnes rejoined the Swans, that the outpouring of joy was entirely based on the fact that he scored against Cardiff?
I think it probably had a lot to do with it.
Yes, and I think that there's definitely an element of truth in what I've said. I think. Don't get me wrong. I know one or two have said that actually we've. Since Bidwell has not been in the team, we have conceded more goals, which that is that's true. Can't really argue with that fact. I think I'm not going to be too critical of Bidwell. I think he was an honest professional that gave his all. He's limited. I think that's the best way of describing it. I mean, especially for the wing back type positions. I think he'd be getting forward and then wasting a lot of attacks. I mean, Barnsley away was a good example of it, and. I just think for long term, he was never going to be right for us under this manager, really. So I understand why the decision's been made. He's probably on a reasonable wage. Obviously, he wasn't going to get another contract, so that's why they've done it. I think it's one of those things where there's just no hard feelings, and I think everybody shakes hands and says thank you for, the efforts that you've given, and you'll go somewhere else now where you're going to be first choice, and. I think it works for everybody. It's just that we're going to need to get somebody in, aren't we? Because Latte Baudier played there, played left wing back at Huddersfield. To be fair, he did a job there, but that's not his position either.
He's not a wing back, is he? He's not a wing back. He's not got that instinct.
No, exactly. He's not. So, I think that's the way we need to look at it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Jake Bidwell, he's not the most gifted of footballers. He's not the most athletic of footballers. But I think I think he's done a solid job for the club over the past 2.5 years. I think, and I think it says a lot about him that he does leave with those kind of messages, because when he first arrived here, I think the attitude is very different towards him. I mean, that first kind of half season under Cooper, at least until we changed to a back five under Cooper, he really did look out of place in the team, and he didn't look up to it. And I didn't rate him particularly highly, I'll be honest. He did look much more comfortable in a back five. He had a very good assist record, considering he wasn't really the most exciting of attacking fullbacks. He wasn't an Ethan Laird, but he did actually set up a lot of goals for us, particularly under Cooper. And the point you made there about the fact that since he's been out of the team, we've been conceding more. I do think we've been at our best defensively this season when we've seen Ryan Manning at left centre-back and Jake Bidwell at left wing-back. It's not something pre-season that I would have expected to happen by any means, but it did kind of work because Ryan Manning had to stay back in that centre-back position, and he got that extra protection then from Bidwell, who's quite a conservative wing-back. And definitely over the last few matches, we've seen that wing really exposed because Manning's been playing left wing back and just gallivanting forward and leaving acres of space in behind him. And it's really left our defence stretched. And I do think we would have been better placed defensively had we had Bidwell in the team. So it's one of these. I think the squad is worse off without Bidwell in it. It'll be interesting to see who we can get in to replace him. I can't imagine that we're going to just leave Latibaudiere to fill that gap, because that just wouldn't make sense. So you'd have to imagine that we're getting somebody in some capacity. But I do think for the time being we've weakened our squad by letting Bidwell go, even though I don't think he's the best player ever. I think he is. I think limited is the word. The word you said there, Steve. It's the perfect description, really. I think he has certain strengths, but there are certain weaknesses there as well. And I think he is basically an average Championship left back / left wing back. But I think he'll do well in Coventry system. I think he'll I think he'll give them good experience as well. They're quite a young side up in Coventry, so I think it is a move that works out well for everybody. Gets him off the wage bill, and just hopefully his wages can be put towards another, a replacement for him, really. We've got more outgoings to discuss. I mean, the likes of Dan Williams and Josh Gould have gone on loan from the under-23 squad. Liam Cullen, Steve, has had a long overdue loan move to Lincoln, where he joins Whittaker. Good move for him, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. He started the other day, didn't he? I think he played an hour for them. So, look, Cullen just needs to play. That's the simple truth of it. He should have gone out on loan before this. I think, in all fairness, I don't think it's his fault. I think the club should have sorted that out for him. So, he's getting a loan spell now. Hopefully he'll do well, and, we can make a decision about what happens after that then in the summer. But, he needs to play games, doesn't he? And, if we're honest at this moment, he's not up to playing regularly for us. So, a loan spell makes sense. If him and Whittaker can get a partnership going together, that would be great as well.
Yeah, I felt sorry for Cullen this season because when he's played, he's been played out of position, either kind of behind the main striker in this sort of almost in a kind of Jamie Patterson type role, or he's been played wide, and neither positions suit him. He is an out-and-out striker, and you either play him there or you don't, quite frankly. But he always tries his best. He always puts in the hard yards. It's just when he's playing out of position, he's not much use. Let's face it. And he needs to be playing in his preferred position if he's going to have any kind of impact. And when you look at his preferred position, he's behind both Joel Piroux and Michael Obafemi in the pecking order. He was never going to make that breakthrough this season. So much better that he goes off to League One to try and develop. Another one who's gone, Steve, is Stephen Bender, who began the season as a number one, but quickly fell out of favour and has now found his way to Peterborough, where he joins another former Swansea goalkeeper, Di Cornell. Good move for Bender, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you've got three goalkeepers, as we'll go on to discuss, I mean, it's too many, isn't it? Somebody needs to go. And yeah, I think that it's not a bad idea because the club can look at it from the point of view now of that Bender obviously can gain some experience. And then, I'm expecting Andy Fisher to be the number one. But then Hamer's out of contract in the summer. If Bender does well at Peterborough, then maybe he'll end up staying here and then Hamer will be released. Or obviously Bender, I'm assuming, will get sold in the summer if we decide to keep Hamer. So that's the situation that we're in now. Bender needs to play, doesn't he? I mean, I do think I saw some good things from Bender when he played, but there was just that rashness about him where he would make a mistake or he would at Preston he came out, didn't he, and he clattered someone. He could have been sent off. I think that was the issue really with Bender. There'd always be a mistake in him. At Blackburn, I thought he had a really good game, but he gave away a penalty, and obviously that cost a goal. So I think that was his problem. He couldn't there'd be a mistake in there, and he needs to try and get rid of those from his game. If he does, then I think he is a good goalkeeper. But those mistakes are always going to hold him back. And if he can cut that out of his game at Peterborough, then he'd be a far better goalkeeper for it.
Yeah, his footwork as well, just nowhere near the required level for the style of play that we're employing. But like you said, a good shot stopper. He's pulled off some excellent saves this season. It's just those mistakes that meant he couldn't be trusted, unfortunately, in our goal. I've got my doubts about him going to Peterborough and whether that's a good deal. He'll probably get first team football there. I don't think Di Cornell is the best goalkeeper. He's only there because Darren Ferguson fell out with their old number one. I'm just a bit concerned because Peterborough are a very open football team. He won't get much protection from that defence. I'm just wondering if that's the best environment for a young goalkeeper who's low on confidence. And I don't know if you saw, Steve, but a couple of weeks back, we put out the team against sort of Brentford B team in a behind closed doors friendly, and they showed the highlights, and he conceded 2 goals which are exactly the same. Basically, he just passed it straight to an opposition player on the edge of his own box, and they managed to punish him for it. It just looked like a keeper who was low on confidence and who didn't have that belief and was making those same mistakes. It was just painful to watch, really. And I just think more than anything, he needs to regain confidence. I just wonder if he would have been better off dropping a level into League One, say, but playing for a team which had a slightly stronger defence and would have given him a bit more protection and would have enabled him to given him a better chance of keeping clean sheets and giving him less work to do. Maybe an MK Dons, for example, who have just lost their keeper, which, like you said, we'll get on to discuss in a bit. But I don't know. I just worry that he'll go off to Peterborough, and I worry that it suddenly becomes a kind of make or break situation for him there, because either he's going to be worked hard, but he's going to really shine and show what he can do and rise to the occasion, or he's going to be worked hard and his deficiencies are going to be put under an even greater spotlight. I just don't know how it's going to go, and I'm not entirely confident that's going to work out for him. I don't know. I don't know if it's the best move for him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, as you say. I mean, Peterborough, you will have a lot to do when you're playing for them, won't you, as you said. So, yeah, I mean, he went to Swindon, didn't he, a couple of years back, and obviously they were the team that won the league, weren't they? So that probably suited him a bit more than having less to do, less pressure on him type of thing. And, yeah, but I mean, Peterborough, as you say, a struggling team. In that sense, maybe not so good, but, I mean, hopefully he'll play. That's the main thing first and foremost, isn't it? Because, I mean, if he's not going to play, then it really is a waste of time.
Absolutely. But we have found a replacement for him. Andy Fisher, who's been linked with us for quite some time, ever since really Russell Martin joined us from the MK Dons. Martin clearly liked what he saw from him at Stadium MK, and he's brought him up to the Championship. I don't know if you've seen much of him, Steve. I haven't, but the clips and the descriptions we've seen certainly make it seem like he's a Russell Martin type goalkeeper. He does like to play it out from the back. I mean, we from my point of view, I think we need Andy Fisher to be a number one. He needs to be good enough to be a number one, because I think Ben Hamer is a very good backup at this level, but I think we probably need better from our first choice goalkeeper. I'm just hoping that he can make that step up to the Championship and become a sort of reliable presence in goal.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, as we said, wasn't it? We weren't happy with the way that Hamer had been playing recently. Bender, as we'd said, was making mistakes. So I think goalkeeper was, I wouldn't say necessarily the top priority position, because as soon as Ethan led, when we really needed a wing back, then we had right wing back, and you could argue now we really need a left wing back as opposed to a goalkeeper being first choice. But look, I think long term we did need a goalkeeper. And, Fisher's obviously a player that the manager knows well. I think he signed him for MK Dons. So, it's understandable then that Martin has decided to bring him in. So, as you say, he does look like the type of goalkeeper that's very good with his feet. I don't think the Swans put a YouTube compilation up of him. There were a few good saves in there as well. So, yeah, I mean, he's been bought, hasn't he, as a sweeper keeper. And, yeah, that's what we're mainly going to see from him. I'm not so sure what he's going to be like with shot stopping and crosses, which, are a priority. And that's something that, for example, Bender, I thought was pretty good at, as opposed to the playing out from the back. But ideally, you need an all-rounder goalkeeper, don't you? But, I mean, most of them tend to go to the top clubs. All the others seem to have the odd flaw, maybe can't. They do have a weakness. So, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Fisher. But I was quite surprised, really, that he didn't play at Huddersfield. I think, I am expecting him to be the number one, really, and I'd be surprised if he doesn't play on Saturday.
Yeah, I think people have kind of unrealistic expectations often of Championship goalkeepers. And like you said, if you have a perfect all-rounder as a goalkeeper, they tend to go to the Premier League. I think, when Freddie Woodman was here, he took a lot of what I thought was unfair criticism because he made a couple of mistakes every now and again. But he was actually, when you compared him to other goalkeepers in the division, he was among the most dependable in the division. So hopefully, if Fisher does make one or two errors, which he could do playing the style of play that we do, let's face it, hopefully fans won't get on his back too much. Another arrival to replace a popular departed player in Ethan Laird is Cyrus Christie. A very different player to Laird, Steve, in the sense that Cyrus Christie is just kind of the quintessential Championship right back. He seems to have been around forever in this division. He's been around the block. He's been to several different clubs during his career. And now he's found himself at Swansea because he couldn't he couldn't break into the Fulham starting lineup. We definitely needed a right wing back. Is Christie the man to replace Laird, in your opinion?
I think it's a good move, really. There's no complaints from me. I think, we urgently needed to get somebody in, as we discussed. And like I say, he's a very experienced player at this level. He's played for the likes of Fulham and Derby and Forest. I think there's about 300 games at this level for him, really. So, I think it is a sensible one. I mean, it's only a loan. I think he's out of contract for Fulham in the summer. So, there is the opportunity to make it permanent. And, I think at times as well, sometimes a bit of experience won't do us any harm either. We've got a lot of good younger players, but, bringing in somebody that is around the age of 30, then there's always room for a couple of those guys in the squad as well. So, yeah, I think it's a good move, and I applaud the club really for acting swiftly after they were really caught out by what happened with Ethan Laird. So, we've solved that problem, really, haven't we? And that was something that we needed to do.
Oh God, I hate talking about 29-year-old as kind of an experienced head and a player who can, the younger players can look up to. It makes me feel so old. It really does. I mean, it's but yeah, that is how I'm looking at Cyrus Christie, who is 2 years younger than me, as a kind of good old head for the younger players to look up to. And I don't think it's the kind of signing that's going to set the world alight. But Christie has proven himself to be a solid performer at this level. You kind of know what you're going to get. He's probably, I'm hoping anyway, going to give us a little bit more in defence than Ethan Laird gave us. He's not going to be as explosive in attack as Laird was, and doesn't have quite Laird's really blistering pace. But he's proven himself in the past. He's an effective attacker. He's got a decent cross on him. I think this is a shrewd appointment to get us through to the end of the season. And I think he could really give us something. Just fill that gap very effectively on the right wing. So hopefully he'll settle in quickly. And after all that, I think we have finally covered everything in the transfer window for this week. It's mad to think that it's probably going to get busier between now and February 1st, but at least we're hoping that the incomings haven't haven't finished yet, and fingers crossed there won't be too many outgoings, at least none that we'd want to stay. We're going to look ahead in a bit to the Preston and QPR match, but before we get to that, Steve, one of the big news stories since we last recorded is that we are actually going to be allowed back into stadiums starting this Saturday, and there will actually be a crowd at the Liberty for the game against Preston. We're all chuffed. Is it the right move in your opinion?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, the case numbers all seem to be, at a level where I would say that things can go back to normal-ish. So, yeah, from my point of view, I was disappointed that we even had this in the first place. But the way we got to look at it was, other than the game with Southampton, we haven't really ended up missing anything. So it's good from the club's point of view. They haven't had to do any refunds really, and yeah, I think everyone will be looking forward to getting back down there again. So, yeah, good news and the right decision for me.
Yeah, new cases have dropped quite significantly over the last few days, which clearly Mark Drakeford feels is enough justification to overturn what had been a very unpopular move among football fans anyway. So we're going to be back in there. I mean, whether or not they made any kind of difference and how much difference it would have made to those COVID rates, not quite sure really. I mean, England didn't take a similar move, and I think their rates have taken a kind of similar turn. So whether or not it made any difference, we don't know. But the good news is that we are going to be allowed back into stadiums. I saw quite a few fans kind of say, of course, the Welsh government are going to do it now before the Six Nations get started because rugby is everything. And I was just thinking, just be glad that we're back in. Honestly, like if he hadn't done it before the Six Nations, they would have been slating him for not doing it. It was people love to complain one way or the other, but the important thing is that we are back into the stadium for the first time since December 11th when Preston come to visit. And Steve, it's quite a big game, really, isn't it? Because we've obviously got a draw against Huddersfield, but the last three league games that the Swans played back in 2021 were all defeats. Two of them at home. The last one, the 4-1 thumping at home to Nottingham Forest. The rival of Preston, a team who haven't set the world alight this season, I think it's fair to say, gives us a good chance, you would have thought, to get back to winning ways.
Yeah, you would think so. I would certainly like to hope so anyway. I mean, Preston, I was at the game in August where we were well beaten. We didn't play very well, but I didn't think they were a great side, if I'm honest. Obviously, they've not had a great season. They've changed the manager, and I do believe, is Mike Marsh the assistant manager there now? Is that right?
Yeah, to Ryan Lowe, who left Plymouth to take over there a couple of weeks back. Yeah,
that's right. So that'll be interesting. I think, Scott Sinclair is there as well, isn't he? Obviously, that'll get a mention because obviously this annoying habit of ex-players scoring against us always seems to rear its head, doesn't it? But I think, we've got to be looking at this game as a game that we need to try and target 3 points from. I mean, we've got some tough games coming up. Obviously, we haven't had a win for a few games either now, so I think it's quite a good one to come back to. I mean, at home, so fingers crossed, and there should be some confidence there. After the fact is we had a good point, and what I would say, especially in the second half, a good performance at Huddersfield. So we should have some confidence. I think the crowd will be up as well. Obviously, the first time for 6 weeks we'll have played at home, so I think a lot of people will be looking forward to that, and so you might get a better atmosphere than what you would for a normal Saturday afternoon in January. So yeah, I think fingers crossed we can get the job done.
Do you think the last three league games before Christmas and in particular that Nottingham Forest shocker are going to be on the players' minds and even on the fans' minds? Because it's been a long time since we've played a league game at home. Do you think it's going to be front and center in their minds, or do you think that's ancient history by now?
That's a good question, really. I mean, this it's a tough one to answer. For some people, it might be fresh in their minds. Probably not so much for me because I was at Huddersfield. I think for some of the ones that maybe didn't go, then possibly. And obviously, there hasn't been a lot, much else to talk about since then in terms of watching us, because obviously we only played that game at Southampton and the game at Huddersfield. So, it might be. I mean, it might. The important thing might be how we start the game in terms of how we're playing, because if we start in a shaky way, then maybe it will play on people's minds. But if we come out of the blocks early and we're playing nice football and we're trying to create chances, then I think it maybe will be more of a distant memory. But we'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Yeah, Swans haven't won at home since the 30th of October against Peterborough. So it's we're overdue a home win, although it should be noted, of course, that we've not played any games between the 11th of December and the 15th of January in the league. I mean, looking back to Huddersfield, were there any kind of changes or even things that you saw at Huddersfield which would encourage you going into a game against Preston that you'd like to see employed on Saturday?
I think Obafemi did well when he came on. It was the best he's played for a while. He did look more threatening, so that was good. I'm not sure I'd like to see him start, but what I did quite like was that because there was no Patterson, the manager sort of was in a situation where he didn't have much choice. He had to go two up front, which that's a good thing from my point of view. We did the same thing in Luton when we were chasing, and it obviously worked there as well. So I think that's definitely something we should look at if we're in a position where we could do with a goal. Maybe look to go with the two up front, really. But I think other than that, what we need to try and just remember how well we did in the second half and try and pick up where we left off, really, on Saturday. That's the best way to approach it. And there were plenty of encouraging signs from that second half in terms of how we were playing. And as I said, we made a team that were above us in the league, quite ordinary. So that's how we really need to approach it. It would be nice if we could have another couple of signings in really before then. But there's no guarantees of that at this stage. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, as we're recording this, by the way, Preston haven't actually lost a league game since Ryan Lowe took over in early December. They've beaten Barnsley, they've beaten Stoke, and they drew against Birmingham. So it's not as if they've faced any great team since then. And as we're recording this, they are actually losing at home 2-0 to Sheffield United. So that's quite. So hopefully that's a sign that maybe those good results they've been having have been a bit misleading. They've also actually had a player sent off, Andrew Hughes, I'm just seeing now, who's from Cardiff, if I'm not mistaken. So he'll be suspended for the game as well, which certainly isn't a bad thing as far as we're concerned. Hopefully that'll be a dent to their confidence. They also lost in extra time against Cardiff in the FA Cup, which for anybody who saw that game, I think drab would have been a bit of an understatement, really. It was not a great watch. Cardiff games very rarely are, but that was not particularly exciting. Steve, in terms of a prediction for this one, how do you see it going?
I think we're due a win, so I'm going to predict 2-1 to the Swans.
Do you know what? I'm going to go... I'm actually going to take the absolutely mad step of predicting a clean sheet for the Swans based on absolutely nothing at all, but I'm going to go 2-0. Preston are always quite boring, aren't they? I'm never a big fan of watching Preston, but in fairness, I do like Ryan Lowe. And I think the man to watch for them is Emil Rees-Jacobsen up front, who is a very useful striker and the kind of striker who I think could cause problems for our centre-backs. But I think if we can keep him quiet, then we'll go a long way towards keeping Preston quiet. I'm hoping that we can get back to winning ways on Saturday with a 2-0 win. Very quickly, Steve will go on to discuss QPR, who we will be playing in midweek next week. This is a rearranged fixture because of the COVID cancellation back in early December. QPR have had a really good season under Warburton, and I think we were all in agreement that the cancellation back in early December came at a good time for us. Do you think we're better placed now to go to Loftus Road and get something?
mean, you'd hope so, wouldn't you? I mean, we weren't playing very well at that stage, were we? So, I think that little break probably didn't do us a great deal of harm. QPR are having a good season. Obviously, they're up there in the top six. A certain John Eustace is the assistant manager who, allegedly was going to be our manager before he backed out of it at the last minute. So that'll be interesting. I intend to give him some stick because I had a few quid on him to be our manager, so he cost me. So QPR, they've always under Warburton. They've played nice football. I don't know if you remember the game down here last season where I think it was quite late in the season where they ended up winning 1-0 with a late goal.
Oh.
They played really, really well.
Painful.
But we were awful as well. I will admit that bit. But I mean, we've had a couple of games where I think they're a decent team. They do like to play some nice football, so I think it could be quite a good game. I think it might be one of them where we don't actually have the most possession because they quite like to get the ball down themselves. So I think that QPR is a game that could go either way. I think if we turn up there and play really well, I'd fancy us to have a decent chance of maybe even winning. But if we don't turn up, then we could be on the wrong end of a comfortable defeat. So, yeah, I wouldn't bet on the QPR game. That's probably the best way of describing it.
Am I right in thinking that we've won our last 2 league visits to Loftus Road?
Yeah, we have.
Yeah,
and Steve Cooper is responsible for 75% of the Swans' wins at Loftus Road in our entire history.
We have a horrible record there on the whole, but actually over the last few seasons we've got there. But this is a different QPR team. I mean, they, in fairness to them, I mean they're fourth in the table as we're recording this, but they're only 5 points off the top 2, and they've got a game in hand on the 3 teams above them. So actually, I mean the loss of form for Bournemouth has maybe opened the door for clubs like QPR to perhaps consider an unlikely push for the automatic spots. And they've got a couple of really good attacking players in particular, and Willock, who's been one of the best players in the Championship this season as far as I'm concerned. Ilias Chair, I think he may actually be away for the African Cup of Nations, which could help us. But then Lyndon Dykes up front, he's he gets his fair share of goals. Charlie Austin, an old stager. Dickey in defence has had a good season as well. You just got a lot of Stephanie Hansen in midfield, a player I've always liked. It's you've got a lot of good players there in that team it's just slowly developed over the last few years for QPR, and they've gone from being a team that was very much thrown together, a lot of inexperienced youngsters in with a lot of Championship old stagers, and for years they were just kind of trying to etch out an existence in the Championship and just trying to avoid dropping into League One. And over the last few years, it's as if they've slowly built into this very good team that's good to watch and very effective. And their recent results are very good. They've won the last 3, including a win against West Brom in their last match. In many ways, Steve, you could say that they're a bit of a blueprint for the Swans in what we're trying to do.
Yeah, you probably could. I mean, as you say, it seemed like at first, obviously, QPR, they chased the dream, didn't they, really, under Tony Fernandes, spent a lot of money, it didn't really work. And then they've been through a few managers since then. Chris Ramsey was in there, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, and they, a lot of it then was about just trying to, sort of get the wage bill down and try and go from there, really, in terms of bringing in a different type of player. And obviously, they've been through a lot of managers. Like Ian Holloway's been in there, isn't he? Again, Steve McLaren was in there, I think, when we first came down, and obviously Warburton's there now, and he's been there for, I think this is his 3rd season there or something like that. So, yeah, I think, as you say, I mean, they could be a bit of a blueprint for us, and obviously they like to play nice football as well, don't they? So, yeah, there's certainly, QPR have learned some harsh lessons, I would say, really, in terms of, spent a lot of money that they probably didn't have, thinking that would allow them to establish themselves in the Premier League, and they paid a heavy price for it. But maybe now they're back on an upward curve, and they're looking good for a possible playoff place, aren't they?
Yeah, they're looking very good for the playoffs, and as I said, maybe having an outside chance of making the top 2 as well. So with that in mind, Steve, you're going up to West London for that match. Are you confident of returning with 3 points?
I think it's possible, but I don't think it'll happen. I'm going to go for an entertaining 2-2 draw.
I think QPR are the kind of team that'll enjoy playing against us. I can see Willock having a bit of fun in the wide areas, dragging our centre backs out of position, and then cutting inside. I think it could be very entertaining. I think it could be very eventful, but I think it'll end 3-1 to QPR. I just think they're in a good place at the moment, and they'll quite enjoy playing against our defence. So I think it'll be back to the bad old days in terms of our visits to Loftus Road. Yeah, we've had a few shockers in the past, it has to be said. Hopefully it won't be among the worst we've had at that stadium. Thank you very much for joining us on this pod. It has been a very long one, but as is so often the case with Swansea City, there's been a lot to discuss. Join us again soon, when hopefully we'll have a bit more good news to discuss, especially in the transfer front, and hopefully we'll have a long overdue win to discuss as well. But until then, thank you very much for listening.